indeed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I thank my honourable friend, the Chair of the Treasury Select Committee and also the Backbench Committee for using this estimates debate to shine a light, and in many ways a warm light, on the performance of Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs during this extraordinarily testing and difficult period. And I'm very grateful to the, all members who've made the contributions that they have to this interesting and lively debate. And I welcome the Honourable Member for Liverpool-Walton opposite to his first debate as my opposite number, and I hope it's the first of many, although I do think he slightly missed the tenor of the argument in calling the government too slow, since most of the other people who've commented have been concerned about the sheer speed of the delivery that we've had here and whether people may have been missed out in this set of measures. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as you will know, coronavirus has the potential to spread with extraordinary speed across a population. In March, the government took the unprecedented step of asking businesses and employees to halt their normal activity for an extended and, at that time, indeterminate period of time. At the same time, or shortly after it, it unveiled an extensive package of support, including a business rates holiday, VAT and income tax deferrals, and government-backed and guaranteed loans worth £300 billion. At the heart of that response, as has been highlighted in this debate, was not one but two major schemes that between them covered the vast majority of the working population. Now, as honourable and right honourable members have mentioned across the chamber, and particularly highlighted by my great friend the member for Wickham, had this been in normal circumstances, it might have taken months, or I think more likely years, to deliver just one of these schemes, let alone two. And he is absolutely right to highlight what an extraordinary achievement it was to bring them both in on the speed they did. He used the phrase extraordinary achievement, and he's right. Instead, of course.
And it was an achievement, but there was a planning exercise. There have been many planning exercises for pandemics, and yet in 2016 the Treasury has told us there was no economic planning for a pandemic. Was he aware of that, and does he think it should change?
The answer is I have not been into the arrangements for pandemic that the Treasury had in 2016, or at the time she mentions, and so I can't comment on that. But what I can say is that when pandemic struck, these two schemes were put in place with an astonishing speed and capability, and I don't think that's contested in this chamber. I think that's well understood. The Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme was announced by the Chancellor on the 20th of March, and it opened for applications just 1 month to the day afterwards. 6 days later, the government announced the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme with a target of making the first payments by the middle of June. In fact, the online portal opened for applications on May the 13th, weeks ahead of schedule, with the first grants being paid into bank accounts on May the 25th and within 6 days of application thereafter. And this was achieved with more than 80% of HMRC staff working from home. Silos disappeared, timelines were condensed to extraordinarily short lengths of time as officials from across Whitehall came together to solve these problems. And in so doing, I think they set up a kind of exemplar of what a really effective 21st century civil service would look like. And it's a model that we are looking at very closely in thinking about how we might change the tax system or change the tax administration system in order to make it more resilient in response to these concerns. Now, these achievements have been widely welcomed in this debate, and rightly so. There cannot be any member who has not walked down their high street in the last week or two and spoken to shops that are reopening and that have had the benefit of the furlough scheme, or traders that have had the benefit of the self-employment scheme. And I am massively proud, I think we should as a House be proud, of HMRC's efforts to design and deliver these schemes so quickly and with such effect. The CJRS, the furlough scheme, has helped 1.1 million employers across the United Kingdom furlough 9.3 million jobs, while 2.6 million self-employed individuals have applied for grants worth more than £7.7 billion. But, and as has been said on many occasions today, I do not pretend for one moment, I don't think any of us does, that these schemes are a panacea. And honourable and right honourable members have rightly highlighted instances of groups and individuals who are very regrettably and unfortunately not eligible under the scheme rules. Now, it's important to say that under no circumstances and at no point have these people been in any way forgotten by the government. We've listened very carefully to honourable members as well as employers and have refined both schemes to include more people where possible. For example, those returning to work after periods of parental leave, reservists who return to their jobs after active service in the armed forces are now able to access the flexible version of the furlough scheme, and similar accommodations have been made with respect to the self-employment scheme. Madam Deputy Speaker, together these measures represent an economic intervention unmatched in recent history. Nevertheless, the practicalities are such that the government has not been able, and I recognise this, to support everyone in exactly the way they would want. And let me, if I may, I'll address some of the specific points raised in the debate in a moment, but it's important first to understand the principles that guided the government's response. Yes, of course.
The right honourable gentleman for giving way. It's not that we wish him to support people in the way that they want, but he has to recognise that there are 1 million people who've been given no support at all. And what we want is some consideration for them. Their businesses, their livelihoods have been affected because of government decisions, understandable for health reasons, to close down the economy. Would he please address that?
Well, of course, I'll be coming to some of the points that she raises later on in my remarks, but of course, we are focusing on the furlough scheme and the self-employment scheme, but of course this has been a tiny percentage, or a small percentage of, in terms of number of schemes, of the overall response, which has included a vast array, £300 billion worth of loans, tax deferrals, grants, reliefs, and the rest of it, and as well as, of course, support to universal credit and other forms of benefit. So it has been a very, very comprehensive system of support, and that is, I think, something, again, of which we can be very proud. Let me just, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, push on. The scale and the urgency, I was talking about the principles involved, the scale and the urgency of the crisis was such that the government's overwhelming and overriding motivation was to deliver the greatest help to the greatest number as quickly as possible. Now, that is the driver behind these schemes. And both were designed to make use, therefore, of existing processes and verifiable data, precisely so as to make the implementation possible in the fastest possible time and to minimise the risk of fraud and error and delay. Any delay would have meant that millions of people who benefited from schemes would not have received the support when they needed it the most. In the case of the self-employment scheme, it's not been possible to extend that scheme to those individuals who became self-employed after 2018-19 because although self-employed taxpayers can file returns for 2019-20, this would have created an opportunity for fraudulent operators and criminals to file fake returns. And it doesn't take an enormous amount of mental mathematics just to calculate that a relatively small percentage of additional fraud equals quite a lot of additional schemes that would have to be assessed and worked through the system, and that is what makes it so difficult. And these problems have been highlighted, as you know, as the House will know, in testimony in front of the Treasury Committee. It's also important, as I've said, to be clear that these are just two measures within a much larger package of government support. Can I also remind, well, if I've only got 1 minute, let me just go quickly to the points that have been raised. The Honourable Member for Central Devon raised the question about, as it were, the fairness to individuals. I understand this point. He needs to be aware, and I think he is aware, that the schemes are targeted at those who need them the most and are most reliant, in the case of the self-employment scheme, on their self-employment income. He has had an explanation of the 95% number that we have used for those with more than half their income from self-employment who could be eligible from the scheme. And of course, many of those people are entitled to claim other benefits. If I turn to the Honourable Lady for Hackney, South and Shoreditch, she talks about beyond the wit. Of course, it's true that people have found themselves finding groups that have been left out. But I put it to her that actually it has been extraordinarily difficult. We've been able to make changes at the margins, but not to the core of it, precisely in order to deliver the benefits we wanted. If I may, I'll just end very quickly, Madam Deputy Speaker, by saying that in response to the gentleman for Wickham, that the OBR has projected some £60 billion in total and for the current schemes, and £15 billion for supplementary estimates, and that may be of the order of magnitude that we're talking about. I wish I could speak longer, and I will sit down with having said that.
Call Mel Stride to wind up briefly.